if there's no way for you to determine, I guess what I do appreciate about this is you as an officer have the right to stop someone in the vicinity. They need to legally stop, listen to you, or they may be subject to come into contact with an officer to stop them from leaving the vicinity.
Correct, depending on the situation. In this scenario, 99 out of 100 times, that father and daughter are going to walk out of there and they're not going to be stopped. But there could be that instance where, I don't know, maybe he paused to look at the car that was about to race or something.
Because sometimes all the thing could be, scenario if it's a late night and a kid who's going to the store who's,
sure.
Who just happens to be that age demographic.
Right, and matches the description of a broadcast or something like that.
Really just stop, looking over some shoulders, what's going on? But like, hey, I was really coming to get some milk.
I just came to Ralph's.
Man, But I guess, to the officer's point, hey, you're in the vicinity, you match the description, and I guess that's where those terminologies come in, because if you match the description, you don't know, but an officer, I guess, has the right to say, hey, there's a guy with a black suit and a green shirt who robbed a store with
and in the same area, right?
And I didn't know that, but that's your right to stop me. Right?
Absolutely. And so the thing there is, and this is where communication becomes such an important part. Communication is key. You need to conduct an investigation if you think that person is involved in that activity. You need to establish whether they're actually in that little bucket where you can say that you've reached the reasonable suspicion standard to detain them. Okay. If you fall short of that standard, you have to let them go.
And I do appreciate the clarity. This is why we're digging into this, because I think a lot of persons just don't understand. But if I could do a quick recap of this portion, it sounds as though in order to avoid, from a community standard, an officer coming into contact with you physically.
Sure, let's avoid the force altogether. Absolutely.
Listen to the command. I think on the prior occasion we even said if you're not comfortable with that officer, you can ask for a supervisor.
You can always ask for a supervisor.
That can
Absolutely.
Be escalated so you don't feel like you're alone in that
situation. Sure. And females can always ask for a female officer. Absolutely, right. Yes.
So why don't we just kind of change? Another question I have is, why do officers, and then just kind of dig in, this is a question we did have from actually a community member a few weeks back. Why do officers seemingly, on occasions, seem like they shoot to kill rather than try to wound to immobilize suspects?
Yeah. So this is, now we're getting into an area that I've actually, being the first commanding officer of our Force Investigation Division / Force Investigation Group that is African American, I thought I brought a little bit of a keen insight to that. What was really interesting was a big deal was not made about that, which kind of shows you how much progress we've made, if you think about it. So let's talk about that for a moment. So on the Los Angeles Police Department and law enforcement in general, when we're taught to use lethal force, our training directs us to use lethal force in very limited situations, because again, we're talking about an area where we've had 1.8 million contacts, and we've used lethal force probably less than 40 times last year. Okay? Certainly in terms of shootings, we had fewer. We only had 33 instances where we shot.
Like less than 1%?
Oh no, it's way smaller than that.
Yeah.
So we're going out 3 digits. Yeah, we're going out. We're talking about of 1.8 million contacts that the Los Angeles Police Department made, 33 were an officer fired a weapon. Yeah. Now we've had other, what we would define as a categorical use of force.
I'm not proud of this statement, but I'm surprised that it wasn't more. And that's the misconception.
Right. That is one of the. So one of the reasons I really was looking forward to this opportunity today is I really want to put perspective to the numbers. And so if you were to ask, and I would love to do a man or woman on the street and go around and ask people, how many people do you think the Los Angeles Police Department shot in the city of Los Angeles last year? It's a tough question. It's tough to walk up to someone like that and ask that question. But I think you would really get a widely varied answer based on social media versus mass media versus what you see, and the numbers would be wildly off. We've actually seen where people come to community meetings and they literally think that we've shot thousands of people in a year, a 1-year time frame. And I'm just here to tell you, we would never be able to catch up if we were shooting thousands of people a year because we can barely keep up with what we're doing now. the investigation is so exhaustive that you would never be able to process all of those investigations.
And when you said out of the 40, is that fatalities or even just wounded?
No, those are total.
Wow.
Those are total officer-involved shootings. Yeah. Now, if we start talking about the specifics in terms of where a Los Angeles police officer utilized force, struck an individual, and they died as a result of the gunfire, not necessarily as a result of the drugs they were using or being hit by a car or something else like that. When we talk about 2018 alone, there were 33 shootings. There were 24 where the officer's bullet actually caused a wound on a suspect. And then there were also 9 where we did not strike a suspect, but we fired rounds. Of those, 12 of those were fatal. So if you go to a location and you tell someone the Los Angeles Police Department made nearly 1.8 million contacts in the community, and you were to ask them how many people did we kill by gunfire, and I was to tell you 12, 1 dozen, most people would laugh you out of the room or say there's no way.
Now, let me do this for I know many humanitarians will be watching this, and I consider myself one of those as well. Mm-hmm. But for someone that says 1 is too many.
I agree with them 100%. I absolutely agree with that.
Just for that sake.
Absolutely.
They may say, well, Brandon doesn't understand that if he compares it to, that's still way out of pocket to where other departments are, other jurisdictions around the world, or things like that.
Let's even back that up. Let's talk about the application of force on a community member, period. One of our goals, and I've been taught this since, I can tell you I've had academy classes back in the 90s. Well, I was taught you want to minimize, there are a number of reasons why we as individuals, individual officers, would not like a long jacket of uses of force in our package. There are a number of different reasons. The unnecessary scrutiny, the number of investigations, etc. Okay? But every time you apply force, it's really like a nick on the community, if you really think about it. That's an instance where we were unable to verbally persuade someone to comply. So now we've had to apply force. And it's kind of like this whole concept I was talking about with gangs. I would love to tell every gang member what the end looks like, because having worked gangs in the City of Angels, I have a pretty good idea of what the end looks like. And here's what I try and tell my officers. You will prevail almost 100% of the time in the use of force, and you will come out okay. But let's talk about how it could have been avoided or done differently and have an honest discussion. And the next one may result in another use of force, but we're going to go back through that process again. And that's how we look at it as a department now. We look at how we can minimize and de-escalate these situations as much as possible, which is not really an entirely new concept in law enforcement nor on the Los Angeles Police Department, because no one wants to go home with broken bones and injuries unnecessarily. Now, when we start talking about the more serious uses of force, we have a number of officers that have been, they've had life-debilitating injuries as a result of force from community members, up to and including being shot. Unfortunately, we had a number of officers that were shot last year. So these are terrible. All of these situations are terrible.
Just because I think it's fair for both sides. Do you have any statistics on how many officers were?
We had 3 that were struck by gunfire.
3?
Yeah, 3 last year.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So
did you guys lose any officers?
We did not last year, thankfully. But if you look at some of our so online, we post now we're ahead of the curve in terms of compliance with posting our categorical or critical use of force incidents.
Okay.
I would strongly recommend that.
Public visit and get this information?
Yeah, so you can go to YouTube, or you can go basically to the LAPD HQ, and then you can follow the link to the YouTube videos of our categorical releases. Some of them you'll see I narrate, and it kind of discusses what happened in those incidents. And some of those incidents, quite frankly, are terrifying. And that is...
That's transparent.
Exactly. It's the ultimate in transparency, really, because we also provide the context. Why were the officers there? What kind of investigation were they engaged in? What were the actions by the community member? Oh, and here's the video. Video never tells the whole story, but it certainly helps explain. Along with the context in the video, I think we're giving a much better story and a much better product, and we're providing that transparency that the community's been asking for years. And it's out there for everyone to see. We're not giving it only to certain people. We're not holding it back. We're giving it to the public in general. And I think that's a good thing, because it shows 2 things. It shows, number one, that we're working for the community and that our heart is in the right place, which is the most important thing. You can follow policy, you can write policy and do all of this stuff, and that's great. But if it's in your heart, that's what matters. So we're really doing the right thing for the right reason. I think it's important for the community to realize that. And this includes the good, the bad, and the ugly. We've had some incidents that didn't necessarily reflect favorably, and we've still put them out. When you start talking about, though, that minuscule number, I just want to go back to this for a second. Let's just say that we have a couple of thousand uses of force that are not necessarily to the level of a shooting or applying a chokehold on someone or something like that.
Using force,
some type of force. Yeah, using spraying someone with OC spray, using a beanbag shotgun, using a taser. Every one of those.
Quick question: does
sure.
use of force, even when hands are involved, like physical touching, wrestling,
yes,
down, is
that's still considered a use of force, depending on the situation. Any force that we use to overcome resistance.
Yeah, the beanbag is not much, but a headlock is enough.
Yeah. So any time that we use force to overcome resistance, that could conceivably be a use of force, and then if there are injuries coupled with it, it is definitely a use of force. That is the vast majority of our uses of force. They're going to be of that type. Grappling techniques, putting someone in some kind of hold, using a arrest and control technique is what we call them, in order to gain compliance. We don't as often use striking, kicking, and all of those other types of responses. We don't use those quite as often as some of the other tools that are what we consider lower on the scale. And that, again, that is the whole thing regarding de-escalation. So you may go to this point, you may have to put someone in a hold. So now we've got him in handcuffs. Now we can back off and go right back to verbal. It's over, and we're not going to do anything else.
And just because I'm asking this and for the public to know, are officers trained? Obviously, where you guys are trained to shoot. Are you guys trained in physical, like fighting activities?
We are.
Certain things? Okay.
So a big part of our training is what's called arrest and control. And so we have people that are inside and outside of the department that are trained experts in martial arts, boxing, grappling, wrestling. And they come and teach different parts of the academy, and we practice that a lot. 900 plus hours of training, a good portion of that goes to self-defense and physical training. Yeah.
A few more for doing